Welcome back to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is week 10 in the National Football League, the official beginning, I guess, of the second half of the season this week with the card. Ian Cameron and our quarterback, everyone's favorite quarterback if you watch this show, Philip Nelson, back with us. Phil, how are you?
Doing great. How about yourself, sir?
I'm good. I wish last week had treated me better from a betting perspective in the NFL than it did, but you have to look at the big picture at the end of the day if you're going to do this as a career like I have for the last 14 years. And it's 4 out of the last 6 weeks have been strong winning weeks, even though last week wasn't the best. And overall for the season, I'm profitable in the NFL. So that's the bottom line at the end of the day, is what you do for the entirety of the season. Now, you did come dressed as a football player with the ECU helmet last week for our special Halloween show. I do want to ask, how was the Halloween activities for the Nelson family?
It was great. My daughter and I and my wife, we walked around the neighborhood with the cousins and whatnot. It was all good. So it was a toasty one, though. It was like 82 degrees down here. I know my buddies up in Minnesota, they were getting snow, but we had a good time, ate too much candy, all that. So
I guess you're explaining why you live there now. Not a big cold weather guy you are, right?
Yeah, no, my blood has definitely thinned out a little bit. I remember being young and, as soon as it hit 50 degrees, it's short and t-shirt weather. And, now all of a sudden the blood's thinned out a little bit. I remember when I first got down here too with conditioning tests, trying to breathe in this humid air at ECU. Holy crap, that's a whole different thing too. So, getting used to the new weather here. So,
well, I'll tell you what, it was 70 Fahrenheit here a couple days ago in Canada. That is a couple days ago here, just west of Toronto, where I am, Phil. And so I'm telling you what, it's one of these situations now where November arrives and you can still get in the Northeast 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So telling you the way the world is changing as far as the temperatures are concerned. The temperature is heating up in the NFL because the playoff races are obviously, and divisional races, now that we're into the second half of the season, get even more important. The games get even more important. So I'm looking forward to this card. We got a great game to kick off week 10. Thursday night football, Cincinnati Bengals and Baltimore Ravens. Got Baltimore 6-point home favorites. 53 is this total, which opened as low as 50 early in the week. And it's seen nothing but over money pretty much. And look, how many games in a row for the Baltimore Ravens have gone over the total? That was one of the games we did like last week, was the over there, Philip, with Denver and Baltimore. And unfortunately, I also like Denver, and I thought they would be good enough to compete. We talked about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens' problems covering point spreads as favorites, and that is actually in play here in this game, bigger favorites. But Denver was just powerless to stop it or do anything about it. Bo Nix, after a good first quarter, second quarter, the Ravens did turn it up on defense. Didn't help, too, that Denver kept driving the ball into Baltimore territory. They settled for field goals. They had turnover on downs. Happened quite a bit to that Denver offense, and they just had no answers, the Denver defense, for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore offense in that 41-10 Baltimore victory. But credit to Baltimore. A nice victory for them in that game against the Ravens. Now they take on a division rival here, Cincinnati. Look, not easy to bet against Baltimore with that offense being so prolific, and they certainly bounced back from the Cleveland loss. But for Cincinnati, we're waiting for this team to kind of get things right. They had that bad game against Philadelphia, but we saw them beat the Giants, the Browns, and the Raiders. The problem is the Ravens are better than all three of those teams. That being said, Cincinnati played Baltimore very tough in the first game between these teams in Cincy in early October. In fact, Cincinnati had a 10-point lead in that game. They ended up losing 41-38 in overtime. Heartbreaking loss for the Bengals. They probably should have won that game. It does concern me that we thought T. Higgins was going to be back, but he's not. He's going to be out once again here for the Cincinnati Bengals in this game. But that's still a secondary that can probably still take advantage. You've still got Jamar Chase. You still have Osivas, who's really stepped up. You still have Gesicki over the middle, and there's been issues defending tight ends at times for Baltimore this year. So there are still a decent amount of weapons for Joe Burrow to take advantage of a very soft pass defense. They're great against the run, but they have had real problems defending the pass, and it's really been that way all season with that secondary. So Going to be interesting to see how this goes. But the Ravens are without Isaiah Likely at tight end, which means they're okay because Mark Andrews is there. They don't lose. They have two starting capable tight ends, two tight ends capable of starting for pretty much any team in the NFL. So remember, they still have Mark Andrews, so it's not the be-all, end-all. But I think in this spot, I like Cincinnati a little bit, plus the 6. They only lost by 3 in overtime at home. Division revenge, division dog, division underdogs, as we've talked about for years on this show, have been profitable long term. They don't always hit, but they're profitable more often than not. Look at Miami last week at Buffalo, divisional underdog, and they ended up getting the win there, or getting the cover at least in that game. I see this similar. If Baltimore wins, I think they win by 3. They win by 4. I don't know if it's going to be by a big margin, and I think the Bengals haven't given up on their season. They're saying all the right things. Joe Burrow's quote after the Raiders win, that's bet on to me. He said, yeah, it was a good win, but we still made mistakes. We know we need to be better. We got a lot of work to do. That's what I want to hear after a win. I don't want to hear, man, we feel great. That was awesome. Just such a huge win. And that leads to being a little bit, content and satisfied for your next game. I don't think you're getting that out of Cincinnati. Now, I worry about their defense because they tried to stack the box against Derrick Henry in the first meeting. And guess what? Baltimore still scored 41 points in that game. But so I could only look over this total. We've talked about it with Baltimore, that 5 straight with the Ravens have gone over. We saw 79 points in the first meeting between these two teams. In fact, we've seen 54 and 79 in the last 2 meetings between the Bengals and Ravens. So over for me, even though it's very high at 53, it's to the point where it's so high that I'm concerned now if it can get over. But I still think it's hard to bet an under with these two offenses. I'm going to take Cincy here, though, plus 6 in a game I think they can compete in. At least offensively, I think they're good enough against that suspect Ravens secondary to compete in this one. Phil, what do you think here, Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, I agree. Obviously both these offenses are hot. Defenses can be exploited. Joe Burrow historically has a great record in November. He starts off the season slow with Cincinnati historically. November, though, he tends to turn it on. And I think this team's kind of hitting a stride here. They have a lot to play for, too. I mean, they don't have a lot of room for error. So I think they're going to come out ready to fire tonight. The Bengals defense, will they be able to stop this Ravens offense? I don't think so. So I would lean towards an over here. But once again, the same thing that we said last week, the Ravens tend to play to their opponents' level. Obviously, that didn't happen last week with the Broncos. But the Bengals are playing for something. It's an AFC divisional matchup. I could see this thing going over. And I'm not willing to give the Ravens the points here. So I would take Bengals plus 6 and then over as well.
And again, these trends, 5-4 against the spread last 19 tries when Lamar and the Ravens have been a favorite at home of more than 3.5. So again, in the now last week they've shot that to hell with the blowout against Denver, but still and even after that, they're still only 5-14 against the spread, laying more than 3.5 points at home. Baltimore. That's the thing that points in Cincinnati's direction. And how about this ATS stat with Burrow? Joe Burrow, when he's not been a favorite, he's not been a favorite of more than a touchdown in his career, 40-20 against the spread. That's pretty damn good, and it's been even better when he's been an underdog. He's been a very, very good quarterback to back as an underdog, and I think this year, if you look at Cincy. When they've been dogs, they probably pushed, depending on what number you got, against Baltimore, plus 3. Remember at Kansas City, or very early in the season, 6.5-point dogs. They should have won that game. They lost by 1. So again, it just speaks, Phil, to how good as an underdog, a betting proposition Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals have been. We'll see if that can continue tonight. All right, on we go to Sunday, and we're back with Europe games. This one taking place in Munich, Germany, I believe, Allianz Arena. Over in Germany, as Weiten Sie Deutsch. I'm sure they're looking forward to the game over there. The Giants and the Panthers. We've got the Giants 6.5-point road favorites, 40.5 the total in this game. Not exactly an appealing matchup for the folks in Germany. I think Roger Goodell deserves to or should give them an apology for giving them this crap ass matchup. But that's another story. Look, the Giants, I was actually impressed in defeat with the Giants last week. I mean, the Giants still don't have Andrew Thomas. We know their offensive line is still compromised, but they battled Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. It was about as good a game I've seen Daniel Jones and the New York Giants offense playing a while. It was a very solid game from Jones, 20 for 26, only 174 through the air, but 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Tyrone Tracy has become a story here for this team. It's almost at the point now where I think he has displaced Devin Singletary as the lead back, and I understand why. He has ran the football very well for this team, but it was a better offensive showing. Even the defense, to hold Jaden Daniels in check at times, like they still gave up yards, but it's a very good Washington team, and they only lost that game 27-22. Here's the thing. We've talked about, Phil and I, the Giants' offensive line for a few shows now, how bad it is. Carolina doesn't get a lick of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. So this could actually be a matchup where Daniel Jones might finally have some time. And if you actually look at the matchup of the Giants offense versus the Panthers defense, I actually think you have to say edge to the Giants offense. That's not something you've been able to say very often this year, that the Giants offense has the edge over their opposing team's defense. But I think that might be the case here in this game with just how bad it's been for Carolina. That being said, credit to Carolina. They finally get off the schneid. First win of the season last week against the New Orleans Saints. But my gosh, you talk about playing with fire in that game, even though they escaped with a 23-22 win. I will say this, Bryce Young, for all the flaws and all the flack and all the criticism he's got, credit to him, putting a drive together with 2 minutes to go, ending with the Chuba Hubbard 16-yard touchdown run to put them ahead. Finally got it done in the big moment there, Bryce Young, and it was a step in the right direction for him. He still threw an interception. But for New Orleans, I mean, they had 230 passing yards. They almost had 200 rushing yards. Alvin Kamara had 155 on the ground. It's still mind-boggling to me they lost that game. They outgained the Panthers heavily. Just incredible. You know what did it? Penalties. You know what did it? Failed attempts on fourth down, settling for field goals too much. That's how you end up getting beat, even though you outgain your opponent. And that's what happened to the New Orleans Saints. And look, Carolina took advantage. They got their first win. Problem is when it's a really bad team, in this case, Phil, the worst team in the NFL, I don't always look at getting that first win as a thing that's a rallying point for a team. I'm not convinced it carries over here in this matchup. Now, the Giants have taken a lot of money, and I like the Giants at -4. I don't know if I like them as much at 6.5. We're still talking about laying almost a touchdown now, a million miles away from home over there in Germany. But I did bet the Giants early in the week. I thought at -4 there was value. I like the way they played against look, they played very well against Washington. Carolina beat a New Orleans team that's been in shambles, that's now lost, 7 or 8 in a row, and just fired their head coach, Dennis Allen. So let's not act like Carolina beat Kansas City or Carolina beat Baltimore or some big-time team. They did not. So I like the Giants early in the week at the better number. I'm a little leery at 6.5. I would say take the Giants in a teaser now. Get them down to a pick 'em as a 6-point teaser leg. That's probably the way I would approach it. Or Giants team total over. I think that you could get to that here in this game. Instead, the Giants team total is at 24, 23.5, 24. I think they can get 24 points against this Carolina. They got 22 last week against Washington. Washington's got a better defense than Carolina. So maybe Giants team total over. And I like the full game over a little bit. I did see progress from the Carolina offense. They ran the football a little bit better with Hubbard. Bryce Young, not great, but it's certainly a lot better than he's been. And I think against this Giants defense, they might be able to do enough on offense at 40.5 slow. So the over is in play, in my opinion, with the full game total. Phil, what do you think here over in Germany, Giants, Panthers?
Yeah, I think, both these teams, this isn't a super appealing one to me either. Especially going overseas. Both these teams have been proven to not be very disciplined. I probably like that the team total over as well for the Giants. But the both teams total 40.5. I'm almost leaning towards the under here. The one thing that we should keep our eye on though is Adam Thielen coming back. I saw that he is now listed questionable. He's a big piece to that offense. That would be a huge help for Bryce Young. Chuba Hubbard, is still doing this thing. But yeah, I think a team total here as well for the Giants is probably a better play here. And I'm probably actually leaning towards a total under here. And I don't like the 6.5 either. I think the Panthers could actually cover that. So I would lean Panthers plus 6.5 here and an under total for the both team totals.
All right, we got the Bills and the Colts. Now, these games are at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're back in North America, of course. Bills and Colts. We've got the Bills 4-point road favorites, 48 the total in this game. Buffalo, not pretty, but a win is a win last week against the Miami Dolphins. Although, you kind of figured Miami was going to give them a heck of a game. Miami was desperate to beat Buffalo. All they've heard is we can't beat Buffalo. Tua can't beat Buffalo. And I thought they played a hell of a game on offense, but unfortunately on defense, when the game was on the line, Dolphins couldn't get a stop. The Bills' offense kicked it into high gear in the second half. They scored. It was 10-6 at halftime for Miami. 24 points for the Bills' offense in the second half. That was the difference. Josh Allen and the offense got rolling, especially through the air. It wasn't a great game for any of the running backs, but Josh Allen, 235 through the air. And what I like is the balance we're starting to see in this offense. Keep in mind they did not have Amari Cooper in that game last week. He is possible to play here for the Bills against Indy, but I like the balance. We saw Khalil Shakir catch it 6 times. Dalton Kincaid, 4 catches. Mac Hollins, 5. James Cook out of the backfield, 5. Keon Coleman, Dawson Knox caught passes. Keon Coleman as well, injury designation. Keep an eye on that going into this game as well. Coleman and Cooper, 2 of the receivers here for the Bills. But the one thing I don't like, and they did not cover last week. They only won by 3 against Miami, 30-27. And the defense did struggle for the Bills. Like Tua picked them apart a little bit. They did not contain Devon Achane in any way, shape, or form. He had a huge game for the Dolphins, so the run defense was hit a little bit. I hate this spot, though, for the Bills. I really do. You're coming off a big division win. You played all the way out west in Seattle on the West Coast before that. Big division win last week. All the quotes were jubilation and satisfaction, which smells like a team that could be a little bit flat potentially for this game against a lower echelon Colts team. The Colts team coming off a frustrating loss. I'll be honest. I'll put my hand up and say I thought Joe Flacco would be better than Anthony Richardson. Last week, at least, he was not. That was a tough game for him. Pressure got to him. And look, those Brian Flores blitz packages. Joe Flacco's seen the blitz a lot. I'm surprised he struggled that much. And his numbers against the blitz have actually been pretty solid in his career. Not last week, not one of his better performances. They couldn't get the offense going. You know what really hurt? And it was frustrating with being on the Colts. Every time they got into Minnesota territory, just this mind-numbing holding penalty or, too many legal participation downfield. It's just they just shot themselves in the foot with penalties on the offensive side every time they got into Vikings territory, and it backed them up. It put them behind the sticks in longer down and distance situations, and it just really hurt them in that game. They couldn't overcome it. That being said, this is now going to be a second consecutive start, Joe Flacco. Shane Steichen is already committed to him being the starter the rest of the season. Back at home, where I still remember Joe Flacco lighting up the Steelers defense very early in the season here at home. The Colts usually play better on offense at home. Usually they just play better, period, here at home. And I don't love this spot for the Bills. I got to admit, I'm leaning Colts here. I don't like going against the Bills. They've been playing great, but they've got the big win against Miami. They were in Seattle a couple weeks ago. Defense did spring some holes last week against Miami. I think Indy's got a better game in them, and Indy is at 4-5. They need to win in the worst way, so you got to expect them to spring it. And also, we have to factor in that guess what the Bills have on deck after this game? Yep, Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes and company coming to Buffalo after this game next week for the big showdown. So coming off a big division win, all the quotes about how satisfied, how awesome it was. We saw the scene of the game-winning 61-yard field goal from Tyler Bass, the Rudy moment, hoisting him up on their shoulders after the win. That smells like a team that is just going to be lethargic here. I've seen this movie, Handicapping 101 in the NFL. Is that sometimes there's going to be teams that throw up a clunker. And credit to the Bills if they don't, but if there's ever a spot it feels like the Bills are going to have a clunker, it could be this one. With KC on deck, the big division win last week. Remember, they're in complete control of the division. So if they drop one here against Indianapolis, it's not the end of the world. They are cruising to winning the AFC East. So I'm leaning Colts here. What do you think, Phil? Bills, Colts.
The thing I feel the best about here is an over. Like you said, I think the Colts play better at home, especially offensively. I think Flacco is going to kind of get his shit back together a little bit this week. However, I think the Bills are playing for more than, the AFC North. I think that they know, with the schedule coming up with the Chiefs and
AFC East,
everything.
but I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
Or AFC East, sorry, yeah, AFC East. But yeah, it's I don't feel comfortable given the Colts +4 here. I would probably lean Bills -4. I think that they're going to at least win by 4 here, but I do think the Colts offense is going to play pretty well. So the thing I like the most is the over here, but I would still lean Bills -4.
Yeah, I'm with you on the over. I think the over is probably a good look, and I liked it last week for Mini again, and I liked it last week for Miami Buffalo. It got there. It didn't for Minnesota Indianapolis, but I think back home Flacco and that offense will be a little bit better, a little more successful, and that Indy defense is still shaky. Let's be honest. Minnesota was going up and down the field, and Minnesota just Sam Darnold threw that interception in the end zone early in the game. That was not a great performance, even though it looked like early on the Colts were playing great. No, Minnesota was still moving the ball pretty well most of that game. So I'm with you on the total. I think it could go over as well. All right, Minnesota, Jacksonville. Vikings, 4.5-point road favorites, 45 the total in this one. See, this one's a bit of a tricky handicap because Minnesota's clearly the better team. This line looks short with Minnesota 4.5-point road favorites. But let's acknowledge that Doug Peterson still has his team playing hard, playing for 4 quarters, and we certainly saw that on display last week against Philadelphia. Clearly, I mean, it's 29-0 for the Philadelphia Eagles early in the third quarter for a horrible, disappointing Jacksonville Jaguars team that could have easily said, you know what, fuck this, we're not winning this game, and then just quit, give up. It's so easy to do that when you're down 29-0. They didn't, though, to their credit. They chipped away 29-8. Of course, the big fumble recovery that Trayvon Walker had really got Jacksonville thinking, hey, we're back in this game to make it 29-16. And like I said, they really made that game interesting there down the stretch. And then they got it to within 6 points after that. And then finally, the Eagles end up putting it away with that 28-23 victory. And at the end of the game, Philly's hanging on for dear life. And there's Trevor Lawrence driving to win the game in the final minute, and then he throws an intercept. That's the story of the season, right? You battle all the way back. You may have a chance to steal one against a good Eagles team on the road, and then there's the pick at the end from Trevor Lawrence. It was surprising in doing my research for this game. Trevor Lawrence against the blitz has been outstanding in his career. This has been something where he's been really good. Really good numbers as far as touchdowns to interceptions, really good completion rate, really good passing yardage numbers against the blitz. Why is that important? Because this is a blitz-heavy Minnesota Vikings defensive scheme under Brian Flores. He loves to bring pressures. He likes to bring exotic blitzes, all that stuff. And Trevor Lawrence, maybe not surprisingly because he's talented, but surprisingly because of the way he's played this year at times, he has actually done all right against the blitz. So it's one of these deals where they might be able to move the football again on Minnesota a little bit. But this Jacksonville defense is still in a world of hurt. Very, very difficult for them against the run or the pass. As long as Sam Darnold can avoid those mistakes like he had early in the game against Indy where he's chucking the ball for a pick in the end zone, they should be able to move the football here. Very interesting that Cam Robinson, former Jaguar, now playing for the Minnesota Vikings on their offensive line. So it didn't take long for the new Vikings left tackle to face his old team. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The Jaguars have been better against the run than they've been against the pass. So maybe they're able to do a decent job on Aaron Jones, but boy, they've been really hurt through the air. And when you've got to deal with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, and now a healthy TJ Hawkinson again, back at tight end as well, that's trouble maybe for the pass defense of the Jaguars. So this is one where I definitely would have a lean to the over. I wasn't loving the total initially, but then I saw Lawrence and the way he's performed against the blitz in his career very well. I'm like, maybe they can move the ball. So that kind of put me to the over at 45. I lean Jacksonville, believe it or not, at +4.5. A big win last week on prime time. You're going now to a non-conference game against a lower tier team on the road. Look, we've seen the Vikings trip up in these spots like the Rams game a couple weeks ago. Jacksonville keeps fighting, okay, and that's enough to keep me off Minnesota. So it's Jaguars or pass for me, especially at +4.5. Although I'll say one last thing that concerns me about Jacksonville. Ezra Cleveland, Brendan Scherf, 2 offensive linemen questionable, 2 starting offensive linemen, and they already traded away Cam Robinson. That is something you may want to monitor before pulling the trigger on this game before kickoff on Sunday. The status of both Ezra Cleveland and Brandon Scherf, two of their starting offensive linemen. What do you think here, Phil? Minnesota, Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say too in terms of the offensive line. I mean, if those injuries are going to hold both of those two starters out, that's kind
going
of
to take me off the over and definitely going to take me off Jacksonville.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly. Yeah. And you know, I could see this game going one of two ways. Either the Vikings go up and Flores whips out his blitz packages and the Jaguars can't handle that. Or, like you said, Trevor Lawrence is great against the blitz, and they make some sort of a comeback here. Because I'm telling you, I wouldn't give the Vikings the points here. I'd lean towards Jacksonville, but that it's going to be tough to see with those offensive linemen being out. I'd probably go with a total under here. I don't know how the Jaguars are going to be able to move the ball and score points. But like you said, the Jaguars have a lot of fight in them, so monitor those two injuries. I do see the Vikings winning this game, but I don't know about more than 4.5. So I'd lead Jacksonville here plus 4.5. And then that over is solely dependent upon if those two guys play for me.
We're getting to that time of the year, Phil, November, December, NFL football, latter half of the year, injury reports get larger because now there's more and more players banged up and bruised at this time of year. Now that you've played, half your schedule, upwards of 8 or 9 games for all these teams. Sometimes there's going to be games you just have to wait until Sunday morning to bet it because of the injury situation. And you want to make sure that specific players, are going to be in the lineup. And this feels like one of those games. Because if you're talking about a team that just traded your left tackle, Cam Robinson, to this Minnesota team, and 2 other linemen not playing due to injury, that's 3 players that started the season as starting offensive linemen for you that aren't going to be playing for the Jaguars. And that would be concerning. So you're right. This is hold off and find out just how healthy that offensive line is going to be. All right, Pittsburgh and Washington. Commanders, 2.5-point home favorites, 45 the total here in this game. This is a really good football game. Very, very interested to see how it plays out. Obviously, big deals made by both of these teams. Mike Williams brought in. Now, Mike Williams looks like he's shot a little bit. At least it looked like that with the New York Jets. Does playing with a team that's now in a playoff mix, going to give him that shot in the arm to be better than he was with the Jets? That remains to be seen. But obviously, and by the way, the Steelers were in on so many different receivers. They were connected to a bunch of them. They were in on Cooper. They were in on Hopkins. They were Christian Kirk. They talked about from Jacksonville. They talked about Brandon Ayuk for a little bit in the offseason with San Francisco. So they've been looking for a receiver for a long time. It kind of feels like they couldn't get the deal they wanted for some of these other players that they were interested in, Phil. So they settled for Mike Williams at this stage, who's obviously, not had a great season with the Jets. But again, change of scenery, and maybe they'll get a little more out of him. Different scheme as well. So maybe the scheme that Arthur Smith cooks up as the offensive coordinator here fits better for Mike Williams. We'll have to wait and see. So they made a big addition. So did Washington, getting Marshawn Lattimore. And this is a great ad. He's obviously, when he's healthy, I'd still say he's a top 10 corner in the end. I don't know about top 5 anymore because he's had some injuries, and I think it's set him back just a little bit, but he's still a top 10 corner. He's still a well above average cornerback in the NFL, and he's going to help a secondary that at times for Washington, that's been their weakness, that secondary. So this is a team that now thinks, hey, we're going to be a playoff team. We have a chance to win the NFC East. They're buyers. I can't believe I'm saying that. The Washington Commanders are buyers at the trade deadline. And here they are, exactly trying to make that push. We'll have to wait and see how this goes. The stop and the run is going to be key here as well, because you're going to see a lot of Najee Harris here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see how they can do with that. As far as Washington on offense, Jaden Daniels, has been playing through the rib injury, bruised ribs the last few weeks. I think he's probably going to be a little bit healthier this week. That remains to be seen. What's going to be interesting here is Washington, can their tackles hold up against TJ Watt? It's the thing you ask every week of the opposing team. I've been impressed with that O-line. Their interior of the O-line's been good because they've been running the ball with Brian Robinson, who's questionable, by the way, Brian Robinson for the Commanders here. But they've been able to run the ball. I have a few more question marks about their edge blocking and these two tackles, especially when you're talking about the likes of TJ Watt. And that's to say nothing of Alex Highsmith, who's pretty good as well for Pittsburgh as far as getting after the quarterback. This is a great game. I don't have a strong take on it. I think Pittsburgh is a pretty good teaser leg. Mike Tomlin is a dog, 60-34 against the spread in his career. I don't like betting against Pittsburgh when they're an underdog, especially at home. This time, though, they're on the road in Washington. I've been on Washington a lot this year. If this is going to be below a field goal, I'm not going against Washington and Jaden Daniels. It's that simple. So I lean Washington. I don't love it, though, because Pittsburgh, as a dog, I don't like betting against. I think it's one of those games where I could bet Washington -2.5 or Washington money line, and also put Pittsburgh on a few teaser legs, like, for instance, pair them with the Giants against Carolina, and you get Pittsburgh up to +8.5, because I don't think Washington's winning by more than a touchdown. I think this is a competitive game, but I have to give the edge in a close game, and why Washington can pull this out. I just trust Jaden Daniels more to make that key play at the quarterback spot to win me a football game than Russell Wilson. I still need to see more from Russell Wilson. I know he had the Jets game. He was all right. Obviously, he has taken over now as the number one quarterback, and there's been some good moments from him, and certainly it helps when George Pickens is catching almost everything thrown to him. There's no doubt. And the Giant win was pretty solid, 26-18, but I need to see more, because let's be honest, Washington's better than the Jets. Washington's better than the Giants. And now you're doing it on the road, not at home anymore. 2 home starts as well for Russell Wilson against lesser teams. Now you're on the road for the first time against a better team. Let's see how Russell Wilson fares with that. What do you think here, Phil? Great matchup. Pittsburgh.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite games this weekend. And really, more specifically, what I'm really excited to see is the Steelers defense versus Washington offense. I think Jaden Daniels has had a great year and everything. Washington still has yet to kind of get one of those key wins versus a true contender. And I think the Steelers are truly a contender here. What I'm leaning towards here is the type of game where Tomlin's going to pound the ball and they're going to play great defense. And what I'm going to lean towards here is experience. I don't like betting versus Tomlin, especially rookie quarterback. I'm feeling an under here. I really am. I'm thinking this is going to be a ground and pound game for the Steelers, control the clock, play great defense. And I think that the Steelers defense is going to give Jaden Daniels a little bit of a run for his money here, a little bit of a tough matchup here for him. So I'm taking the Steelers +2.5 and an under here. Honestly, I think that's the type of game it's going to be. And I'm relying on experience here with Tomlin.
I like it. It's going to be a great matchup here. There's no doubt. Atlanta, New Orleans, not so much. Atlanta, 3.5-point road favorites, 46.5 the total. So Atlanta's been steamed. Pick them to -3.5. Betting markets are crashing on the Saints. Obviously, it's not a good look losing to the lone winless team in the NFL last week, Carolina. And that's problematic. There's no doubt. Meanwhile, the Falcons off a very impressive and strong victory at home against Dallas, 27-21, back-to-back wins. They're 5-1 straight up their last 6 games. The only loss was at home against Seattle. So people are loving what they're seeing from Atlanta. 6-3 versus a 2-7 New Orleans team. But I'm going to pump the brakes on this right now with this Atlanta love now more than a field goal. New Orleans fires Dennis Allen. This had to be done. The only thing I'm shocked by with this news that Dennis Allen was fired is that didn't happen earlier. It didn't happen sooner. We talked about the record as a head coach in his career was 24-46, coming into this season. Terrible. I'm shocked he stuck around this long. Darren Rizzi, the special teams coordinator, takes over as the interim head coach for this New Orleans team. And look, we saw it with Antonio Pierce with the Raiders last year. We've seen this in other sports, hockey, basketball, that when a new coach takes over, there's a bump, at least for one game, and everyone plays good, and it calls everyone to attention, and you get, at least for 1 week, a step-up effort from a certain team. Wouldn't shock me to see that from the New Orleans Saints here. And let's be honest about when they played Atlanta down in the ATL back in September. They should have won that game. Atlanta won at 26-24 with a last-second field goal, but New Orleans outplayed the Falcons. The Saints outgained the Falcons. Carr had a good game. Kamara and Hill, who are going to be healthy. And remember, they just returned last week, or Hill did, I should say. So they've got Kamara and Hill in the backfield. The concern I have is that for the New Orleans Saints, Chris Olave injured again last week. Rashid Shaheed may not play as well. So you're talking about two of your best receivers. And last week they were banged up big time at cornerback in the secondary. 3 corners out, and you just traded away Marshawn Lattimore to the Washington Commanders. So how the hell is that secondary going to hold up potentially against Kirk Cousins in that Falcons offense? That is a concern. But boy, from a spot perspective, you got the Falcons off back-to-back wins on the road against a team they already beat, and you've got a Saints team that everyone thinks is down and out but could rise up for 1 week after the coaching change, which wouldn't shock me. I'm hearing the spirits are high in practice. They're running an up-tempo, fast-paced practice this week, the Saints. That's positive to me. A lot of the quotes are positive to this coaching change. I think they do rally the troops and win one for the Gipper here, or at least try to, New Orleans. So I know everyone's backed Atlanta, and there's not a lot of people. I might be alone here on New Orleans Island, or the Bayou Island, I guess you could say. But now that it's up to 4 in some spots, I'm going to take my shot with the Saints here. They should have won the first meeting. I think they get a bump from the coaching change. I'm liking all the positive stuff I'm reading from the players, at least in light of the coaching change. I think for 1 week they give, and it's a division game. They don't want to lose to a division team, the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm going to take a shot here with New Orleans. Plus, can we really trust Atlanta week to week? There are some times where I still remember that Seattle game that they just absolutely shit the bed in that game. And let's not forget that this season, when they've been on the road, they got absolutely, when on the road, they did beat Carolina, but they barely beat Tampa. Tampa was decimated with injuries. And then against Philadelphia back in September, they only won by a point, and they needed a last-second drive. So Atlanta's still not a team when they're laying more than a field goal with Raheem Morris, too, who's not exactly the second coming of Tom Landry from a head coaching standpoint. That's not a proposition I'm in love with taking either. So I'm going to buy into the coaching change angle this week. New Orleans +4. I lean over, too, and I will be on the over, especially if I hear that these corners are out for the Saints. What do you think here, Phil? Atlanta, New Orleans.
I get what you're saying with the coaching change, and sometimes that sparks some things, but I just think that between the coaching change and then also just all these injuries, I just can't do it with the Saints right now. The Falcons are hot. I mean, they're moving the ball. Last week they looked pretty damn good on defense. I know it doesn't say a lot against this, the Cowboys offense. But with Olave being out, their best offensive weapon, trading away Lattimore, these corners out, I just think there's too much to overcome here. And I actually really, really like this Falcons -3.5 and an over here. I think the Saints will still be able to move the ball. But I just think there's too much going on for the Saints right now, and the Falcons are playing pretty well. So I'm leaning Falcons -3.5 and an over here.
Yeah, so I'm leaning Saints in the over. So there you disagree on the side, but we like the over here in this one. All right, Denver and Kansas City. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs 8-point home favorites, 41.5 the total in this game. Now, Denver got absolutely destroyed last week against Baltimore. Not pretty at all whatsoever. We'll see if they can bounce back here. Won't be easy. This game at Arrowhead here in Kansas City. Chiefs had a battle with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, but they get the overtime win against Tampa Bay. That was a good game for me, Phil. I said last week on the show, too many points to be given Tampa Bay, even with all those injuries. And that was a clean sweep for me. Bucks plus the points, Bucks team total over, and we had the Bucks Chiefs over for the full game. All three of them ended up coming through. Talked about for a while that Kansas City, for a long time, they're this under team, running the football a lot. Not a lot of explosiveness in the passing game. Well, DeAndre Hopkins does help that a little bit because he can get the other receivers open as well, which has been key. When you look at last week, Hopkins was great against Tampa Bay, but Patrick Surtain, the second, who's a phenomenal corner, probably going to be shadowing him quite a bit in this game. So can Kelsey step up? Can Justin Watson maybe have the kind of game we saw from him last week against Tampa Bay? That's going to be the question here. Broncos haven't been great against the run, so this could be a game where Kareem Hunt, has some success. We'll see. But I think Denver does have a better game in them. They're probably not going to have much success running the football. The run game's been almost stagnant lately for Denver. Javonte Williams does he even play for this goddamn team anymore? I mean, my gosh, I mean, they're just not running the football very well anymore. So a lot has been on Bo Nix's shoulders. There's no question. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. I don't love the matchup necessarily for Denver, but I don't know if I love the spot for Kansas City.
Yeah.
And Kansas City, when they're being asked to lay points of more than a touchdown, they continue to be a team I don't trust in this kind of point spread range. So I do have worries that Denver, with the inability to run, relying just too much on Bo Nix through the air, and Bo Nix has probably become their running game as well with his ability to run the football. I mean, you look at last week, he almost had as many rushing yards as Javonte Williams against Baltimore, but he's getting better in the passing game. There's no doubt. He's getting better. He's getting more comfortable. Cortland Sutton and him have found some great chemistry. And I don't love the rest of that receiving core, but I will say little Jordan Humphrey and this Devon Bailey has really stepped up for the Broncos lately. But again, you look at Kansas City going back to their track record, laying more than a touchdown twice this season, laying more than a touchdown. And it was back-to-back weeks here facing Las Vegas and Tampa Bay. They didn't cover either game. They beat the Raiders by 7 on the road. And, of course, it takes overtime to beat Tampa last Monday night. So, spot-wise, I lean Denver here, and I think I'm going to be on Denver. Nothing for not exactly best bet material because I worry about the matchup a little bit. But I don't mind backing a team in a division. Again, another division underdog, getting points like this off a blowout loss like they suffered against Baltimore last week. I think you get Baltimore with a strong effort here. The hope is it's good enough to keep this to a one-score game. So I like the Broncos here. What do you think here, Phil? Denver, Kansas City.
Yeah, I agree. I think Broncos coming off that big loss last week. I think Sean Payton's going to kind of kick their ass this week a little bit. Divisional opponent, all that stuff. I see the Broncos coming out and actually being. I could see this being the Chiefs' first loss. Really, I have.
Outright! Wow. Well, they were flirting with a loss last week. Easily could have lost that game.
And I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, I really think that the Broncos, they're going to come in and play their type of football. +8, I could definitely see that. I think that, like you're saying, with these types of points with the Chiefs, I don't feel comfortable with that, especially divisional opponent. I do think that this over will hit, especially if we're going to take the Broncos +8 here. I feel comfortable with this over. Although I will say, that the Chiefs under has been, the under Chiefs versus divisional opponents have been kind of a common theme here. So,
but the counter to that is 2 straight overs for Kansas.
Exactly. That's the counter. So, with Mahomes' new toy and DeAndre Hopkins and the Broncos just getting their ass kicked last week, I think the Broncos are going to come out and put up a much better performance this week. Divisional opponent. I'm taking Broncos +8 in an over here.
All right, good stuff. They've got the 49. Speaking of the Bucs, Kansas City's last opponent, they're hosting the San Francisco 49ers. San Fran -6, 6-point road favorites. The total in this one currently 50.5, 51 across the board. Kyle Shanahan's not revealing it, but he's back at practice. Christian McCaffrey's playing. Simple as that. He could be coy and just not say shit to the media because he just wants to not give the opponent, any extra, game plan info, if you will. But he's playing. If he's practicing, he's playing. And I expect Christian McCaffrey to make his return here for the San Francisco 49ers, especially because this is San Fran off their bye week. So he's had all that extra time, to get healthy and get right and back in the lineup here for this game following the win against Dallas on the Sunday nighter a couple of weeks ago. And obviously, if that's the case and he's back, it's going to be huge because look, we thank Jordan Mason, and it's like when you finally the soldier that gets sent home after a great job overseas, protecting his country of one of the troops. We thank you for your service, but you're no longer required. Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerrero for the 40 great job by both of those guys. But the leader of the running back room is back. In Christian McCaffrey, it looks like, for this game here going into this matchup. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. I mean, this secondary is just beyond shattered, beyond ravaged for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's hard to envision Brock Purdy not having a lot of success to Deebo, to George Kittle. It looks like Jawan Jennings a guy that has had really good chemistry with Brock Purdy this year, could also be back at receiver for the 49ers. So we're looking at as healthy a 49er offense as we've seen in a long time, and I don't think I like that from a Tampa Bay standpoint with the state of their defense right now. Tampa Bay, meanwhile, heartbreaking loss. Tampa Bay fights the good fight. They play hard. It's not an issue with that, but it's just they're so banged up on defense. They still miss Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, their top two receivers. And while they're getting everything they can out of Cade Otton, the tight end, and Sterling Shepard stepped up last week, and Trey Palmer is trying to give them a little boost too at that position. And they have White and Irving, two solid backs. It's just not enough when you're without your two best receivers and your defense is just decimated. You can't overcome that, especially against a good team like Kansas City. And then too many penalties. I mean, I've seen this. They're not a well-coached team at times, and we've talked about this with Todd Bowles, and again with the rerouting situation. Last week, you got receivers running wide open down the field against this Tampa defense. You've talked about how they'd never reroute shit on that side of the ball. And speaking of shit, by the way, it's a great segue because every time something goes wrong for Tampa, or they take a penalty, or they miss a field goal, or they have to punt, or something bad happens, they show Todd Bowles on the sideline. He has that facial expression of someone taking a shit on the toilet.
Right.
Really, it's like he's got that face all the time. It's like every time something bad's happening to his football team, which has been a lot more lately. This feels to me in the pit of my gut, even though it's 6 on the road. San Francisco might be just chomping at the bit to get back out there, get their season going. They're still in the mix in the NFC West, even though they've had an injury-riddled, inconsistent type of year at 4-4. They might just pound the piss out of Tampa here, and I don't trust Tampa to rise up after just a gut punch of a loss in overtime against Kansas City Monday night, now on a short week with a banged-up defense. Still your top two receivers out. San Fran has won the last two meetings, Bowles versus Shanahan, 2022, 2023, 35-7 Niners, 27-14 Niners in those two games. I'd actually lay it with San Francisco. I'm leaning into that. Certainly a San Fran team total over might even be a better bet, in my opinion. The team total here sitting at 27.5. I think they can get 28 against this really beleaguered Tampa Bay defense right now, which is given up, by the way, 41, 31, and 30 in the last three games. Phil, what do you think here, Niners, Bucks?
Yeah, I completely agree with you here. I think just between the Buccaneers, coming off a short week, decimated with injuries, 49 or not a bye week, a short week. The 49ers coming off a bye week, regaining, their best offensive weapon. They have a lot to play for, out there in the NFC West. I could see the 49ers running away with this one as well. So I would not be surprised if this is some sort of a bloodbath here. And 27.5, that seems low. And even the -6 spread seems low. So, I would hammer that. I'm taking the 49ers here. I don't know about the total for both teams here. I don't know if the Buccaneers, necessarily are going to be able to move the ball without their weapons as well. Obviously, Liam Cohen, I'm giving him his flowers, though. I mean, he's been doing a great job with the limited amount of, talent he's been having. But, I feel more confident than anything 49ers -6 here and a team total too.
I know Philip Nelson's got to be, in my opinion, one of the biggest Liam Cohen fans going right now. Every time we talk Tampa Bay on this show, Liam Cohen reference is coming from our guy Philip.
Dude, it's incredible what he's doing with all the limited resources he has, and and he's getting his running backs touches. Cade Otton, they're doing a great job. Being able to continue to fight, and I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan too. I think that guy, he's been in situations and he's made lemonade out of those situations. So, he's a fighter. That's one thing that I'll give him, but I don't think that that's enough power here with the 49ers coming off this bye week.
All right. New England and Chicago. We've got the Bears 6-point home favorites, 38.5 the total here in this game. This is the last of the early games, by the way, at 1 p.m. Eastern time. This is a tricky one. New England obviously losing to Tennessee last week, and that was a back-and-forth game. I think we were heads up on this game because I think Philip liked New England a little bit, and I like Tennessee. Well, it depends. If you got New England plus 3.5, you won. If you got Tennessee -3, which is what I had, you pushed. So it was 20-17 there for Tennessee in overtime. Jacoby Brissett went back to the Jacoby Brissett. Or actually, it was Drake May, last week at quarterback. Yeah, Drake May played at quarterback for the Patriots. Remember, he got banged up and left the game against the Jets the week before, but was good to go. He still played okay. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. We'll see the 2 picks you don't like, but the 1 pick was in overtime when he's trying to, go down the field and win the game. Had to be a little more aggressive there. What I'd like is that he gives them a run component, which is very good to see. Meanwhile, Chicago, a 29-9 loss to Arizona. Caleb Williams has regressed here these last 2 weeks. I can't really explain it. Well, Arizona's defense has been spotty. So I'm a little bit surprised that he had that bad of a game last week against Arizona. That really did surprise me. The difference has been, he's been under siege these last couple weeks. There's no doubt. Now, the difference is here, New England doesn't get any pressure. So Caleb Williams, this is it for Caleb Williams. If he struggles here, I'm getting worried. I'm getting concerned. Mm-hmm. It's one thing against Washington and Arizona. There's some semblance of a pass rush there. There's none of that with the New England Patriots right now. So this is a game where definitely you'd like to think Caleb can get going a little bit. Remember, you still have DJ Moore, and Roma Dunzane. You've got, certainly a lot of weapons to work with. This should be a game where that Chicago offense picks things up. I'm interested in a Chicago team total over in this game. 20.5, 21, 21.5 is where that team total is right now. So make sure you shop around. If you can find a 20.5 with it, I really like it to get below that key number. I prefer that than the full game over because the New England offense, and I like what May can do, but the Chicago defense is still pretty good, and it's been solid most of the year. Now, I didn't love the way they played last week, but remember, Kyler Murray can make things happen with his feet. They played very well against Washington the week before, against very good quarterback in Jaden Daniels. So I lean Bears for sure, -6. Bounce back spot. I don't trust New England on the road for a second straight week. And let's be honest, New England's not playing Tennessee now. Chicago's a little bit better than Tennessee. I lean to the -6, but I'm a little leery asking the Bears to win by margin. They're not the win by margin type of team. Now, maybe this week they can because New England's that bad. But I do lean Bears, but I think I prefer the team total over around that 20.5, 21 right now with Chicago. What do you think here, Phil? Patriots, Bears.
Yep, I completely agree with you there. I don't love this both team total here, but I think the Bears can definitely put up more than 20. I expect them to win the game by more than 6. Not entirely sure here. I could see this being a 21-17, something maybe along those lines there, 21-16 or so. But yeah, I think Drake May, he's talented. He's playing very well, I think. But this Bears defense, I think, just coming off this loss, they really need to, they need to freaking, get it going. So, I'm leaning Bears -6 here as well. I don't know if I could give them the -6. Actually, I think that they could win. I think the Bears are going to win this one, but I like that team total better as well. I think the Bears defense are going to kind of put a little bit of a stop here to the Drake May show here. And this Patriots defense isn't going to get any sort of a pass rush, so Caleb Williams should be able to utilize his weapons there too. So.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how this plays out. Like I said, a very interesting matchup here, Patriots and Bears. All right, next up, we've got the Titans and the Chargers. Chargers 7.5-point home favorites, 39 being the total here in this game. Great win last week for the LA Chargers against the Cleveland Browns. I had the Chargers last week, did have the over in that game, though, and thanks for nothing. Thanks for reverting back to the bad Jameis.
Yeah, nobody saw that one coming.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem, man. That's the problem with Jameis Winston. He could play one of the best games of his career like he did against Baltimore, and he can absolutely shit the bed, like the very next game like he did last week against the Chargers. That's been his career. That's his career in a nutshell right there, and it happened last week. But you got to give the Chargers have a very solid defense. They do, and they've played very well all year. They have not given up more than 20 points now in 6 straight games. Pittsburgh got 20. No one's hit 20 points against the Chargers since then, even the mighty Chiefs. And Patrick Mahomes only scored 17 against the Chargers defense. 16 allowed to Denver, 17 allowed to Arizona, 8 and 10. Jim Harbaugh, man, he's got himself a nice little defense right now, and they're getting healthier. I think Joey Bosa just came back. Their secondary, Derwin James has managed to actually stay healthy for a change. it's definitely been some good stuff from the Chargers defense. They've gotten the pass rush. They've been good against the run, all this stuff. Very, very impressive. I think they're going to make life miserable for Mason. I assume it's going to be Mason Rudolph again at quarterback for Tennessee. Let's be honest. That was a weak New England defense, and they didn't move that ball consistently. And everybody knows Tennessee's been bad, and yet they're 1-7 against the spread this year. And so even though they're a bad team, you still haven't been able to make money backing the Titans. It's not always easy to ask the Chargers, especially when it was those two numbnuts coaches back in the day, Anthony Lynn and Brandon Staley coaching for this team. It wasn't easy to lay bigger points with the Chargers, but I'm very tempted to lay the 7.5 here with the Chargers. I think they're just much better. I think they have a run in them. They're now 5-3. They've won 3 of their last 4. Justin Herbert's looking better and better. Now, I didn't like that he took 6 sacks last week, but Tennessee doesn't get much of a pass rush anymore. I think Herbert should have a clean pocket, have a good game. Ladd McConkey has really stepped up, the rookie out of Georgia. He's been good for this team in the passing game for the Chargers. And on the flip side, I think the Chargers defense is going to completely bottle up this weaker Tennessee offense. That defense is really good. It was the defense that actually carried the Chargers because they didn't do anything in the second half, but it was the defense that just totally shut down Jameis and the Browns offense and allowed the Chargers to still comfortably win that game last week, even though the offense didn't move the football very much in the second half. So I like the Chargers -7. I really like the Chargers in a teaser, not just the -7.5, but get them down to -1.5 in a 6-point teaser. I think a Chargers -1.5 with a Pittsburgh +8.5 6-point teaser is really good this week in the NFL. So Chargers in a teaser, and I'm probably going to grab a little Chargers -7.5 as well. I think they can win this one by double digits because I think they can completely shut down the Titans, something like 21-10 for the Chargers in this game. What do you think here, Phil? Titans, Chargers.
Yep, that's exactly along the same lines I'm on here. I think this Chargers defense is incredible. This Titans offense is abysmal. I completely foresee the Chargers bottling up Mason Rudolph and whatever the hell they got going on in Tennessee. I'm tempted too. Chargers -7. I think that this could really, it might bleed out a little bit here, but I don't see the Titans putting up points. So I'm leaning Chargers -7.5 and an under here.
And even more than the under, maybe Titans team total under. That might even be even stronger here with this one between them. And the one thing, too, is the under could get there, too, because the Chargers are not a get up and down the field quickly type of offense. They're methodical. They run the ball a lot of time comes off the clock. So, yeah, hard to be. It's a very low total. I get it. But, yeah, I don't like the over even at 39 here. Philadelphia and Dallas. Eagles, 7-point road favorites, 43 the total. I don't think I'm going to be touching this game. I really don't. I mean, it kind of feels like you're paying a price now on Philly because Dallas now has no Dak Prescott. Cooper Rush is going to get the start at quarterback here for the Dallas Cowboys in this game. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. You know what I'm surprised by? I know why Cooper Rush is starting. He's been in the organization for a long time. Wouldn't this be a great chance to give Trey Lance a look?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you want to see what he's got? You got him from San Francisco. What did you get him for? To just stand there like a dope on the sideline, holding a clipboard, wearing a hat? Come on. I mean, do you not want to see if he's got any kind of potential for your franchise down the road to maybe be a quarterback for you? You know what Cooper Rush is. He's a serviceable backup. He's never going to be a number 1 quarterback in this league. Trey Lance still might be in the right situation, or at least have a chance to start some games for you. I would have started Lance, quite honestly, but I'm not surprised. Dallas has no clue what they're doing. From top down, from old man senile Jerry all the way down, they have no clue what they're doing. This organization, McCarthy, the coaching staff, you name it. So I'm not shocked about any bad decision they make anymore. But the problem is, look, last week against Jacksonville, Philly is not the easiest team to lay points with. They have these lulls during games. The defense suddenly, the secondary gets carved up, and that is a concern here. The secondary is kind of weak for the Eagles compared to their front. And the one thing Dallas can do is throw the ball. They can't run, but they can throw, and Rush, can be good enough to be able to make some plays to CD Lamb and down the field. So I don't know. I think you're paying a premium now for Philly at -7, but I don't want any part of Dallas either. So it has me off the game. What do you think here, Phil? Eagles, Cowboys.
Yeah, the Cowboys are just a mess, and no one expects them to win. But you know what, or win or cover here. But I actually think that's exactly why they're going to keep this one close. And I don't trust Sirianni, to be honest. I think Sirianni makes some very questionable calls in these games. And, divisional opponent in Dallas, Micah Parsons is coming back. Is that right? Or is back?
Uh,
So Micah Parsons, I could see him coming in there and having a factor in this game. I think the Cowboys keep this closer than we all think. Just purely given the fact that no one's given
Yep,
him a
full
chance.
return for Micah. Yep, he's back.
Full return for Micah too, and I think that Cooper Rush, man, what it was a few years ago, he comes in there and goes 2-0 or 3-0, whatever it was. So I think the one question mark here, though, I know that CD Lamb's listed as questionable, and I know he got hurt last weekend. That's another thing to consider here. But man, I think divisional opponent in Dallas. Dallas is always tough at home.
Eagles have to play Washington on a Thursday night, which could decide go a long way to decide in the NFC East on Thursday next week. Philly's got Washington.
Exactly. So you know what? I kind of like the Cowboys +7 here. I don't want to give the Eagles that many points. I don't trust Sirianni. I think the Cowboys can keep this closer than what we all think.
I like it. That contrarian type of thought here for Philip Nelson when it comes to the Eagles and the Cowboys. And often, not always, but often in the NFL, it's not the worst thing in the world to go contrarian because, like I say, a week-to-week league for a reason is what they call it. No team is as good as the week before, and no team is as bad as the week before. I'm pretty confident saying that the team we're about to talk about next definitely won't be as good as the week before, and that's the New York Jets. As they take on the Arizona Cardinals. We've got the Jets 1-point road favorites, 46 being the total. This is another tricky game for me, but eye test tells me Arizona might be the better team right now. I like the way they're playing. They beat Miami on the road. Very impressive when Tua came back, too. That was a Tua game for Miami, and the Cardinals went on the road and beat the Dolphins, who nearly beat the Bills last week in Buffalo. So that made that win look more impressive. And then last week, they dominate not a great, but a good, solid Chicago Bears team at home, 29-9. I like the trajectory of this Arizona team. Now, the fear I have, because I want to take Arizona, I lean Cardinals, would only bet the Cardinals here. But the fear is, does that Jets win against Houston propel them to a bit of a run? Have down the stretch to try at least to get back into the wild card race. I don't think they're getting back in it. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but at least that win gives them a little confidence and a little pep in their step going into this game. But I want to caution everybody that may like the Jets here and Aaron Rodgers. When they beat Houston on Thursday night last week, that Texans team was in a brutal spot, going on the road short week, banged up on the offensive line, top two receivers out, Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, and you saw the difference it made. That was definitely a Houston team that was ripe for the picking. Now, let's not take it all away from the Jets. Aaron Rodgers was better, and Garrett Wilson won them that game. The unbelievable highlight reel catch he made in the end zone in the fourth quarter, one of the great catches you'll see against the Texans. And then he made a couple other great grabs. That's the Garrett Wilson they want to see every week, not just glimpses of it here and there. Can we get that version of Garrett Wilson every week? It looked like Davante Adams finally was getting more comfortable and getting that old chemistry back with Rodgers, the touchdown pass that put the game away late in the fourth quarter against Houston. So, yeah, positives for the Jets, but I don't trust them. Let's put it this way. I need to see more from the New York Jets before I'm ready to back them. A win against a banged-up Houston team on a short week at home is not enough to me. So I lean Arizona. What do you think here, Phil? Jets, Cardinals.
Yeah, I agree. I think one good week and I've been the Jets believer.
I was going to say I have a feeling maybe
from the beginning. Beginning, and you know what? One good week against a decimated Texans team just isn't enough for me. Hassan Reddick played great. I think he's a factor now. I think Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams. I mean, I just don't understand as a quarterback and an offensive coordinator how you have these weapons and you can't move the ball a little bit more than they do. But they're figuring it out. And, I don't love this game. I will say if I had to pick someone here, I would pick the Cardinals just because I've been burned by the Jets and this isn't enough for me to fully back the Jets here. But I don't love this matchup. Would I be surprised if the Jets go down there and win? No. And that's why I'm not touching this one. But if I'm putting any money up for anybody, it'd be for the Cardinals here.
I want to say 3 Jets offensive linemen missed practice, by the way,
Oh,
yesterday
that's
for
a
the
big
Jets.
deal.
This Elijah Vera Tucker, man, is always on the friggin' injury report. This guy,
Yeah.
unreal. John Simpson, Morgan Moses, holy shit. So they've got some injuries here on the O-line, the Jets, something to be aware of. And Aaron Rodgers ain't that fleet of foot like he used to be, especially coming off the 40 now and coming off the ankle injury. So yeah, that is definitely something that would be concerning here. And I was leaning over, but now I'm going to pump the brakes on the over here in this game.
Yeah.
Because one thing, Arizona should be able to run the ball. They have not been good against the run. That's been one of the disappointments of the Jets.
Right.
James Conner should have a good. They've also been sliced by tight ends, the Jets defense. So Trey McBride, who's had a couple of big games already this season for Arizona, he might be able to have another big game here for them in this one. All right, we got a good matchup, Phil, for Sunday Night Football. Next up, Detroit Lions, Houston Texans. Detroit 3.5-point road favorites, 48.5 being the total here in this game. I think the critical thing for Houston is the O-line going to be better this week, healthier this week for Houston, and is Nico Collins going to be back? Because there was talk he might be returning for this game, but he missed practice, and so it's still very much up in the air if Nico Collins is back. Nico being back would be enormous. Because with Nico on the field, it looked like a different Houston offense, a different passing game, a better passing game, and it looked like a much better C.J. Stroud when Nico Collins was available. Or that's how much of a difference he makes. He's clearly been C.J.'s biggest and most favorite target. And so getting him back in a game like this against an excellent Detroit Lions team would be absolutely huge and paramount. There's no question about that. I got to be worried. This is like Buffalo all over again, this game for Detroit. I worry about this spot a little for the Lions. You're coming off a downpour at Lambeau last week, a big division win. You steamrolled Green Bay last week in that game. And now you're going on the road here for another game Sunday night, though out of conference against a Houston team that's coming off getting whipped by the Jets. Or not whipped, but they didn't play well against the Jets.
Yeah.
Feels like a Texan spot. It feels like a Texans slam dunk home run spot, but I can't get myself to bet against Detroit only laying 3.5. I can't. I just can't. They're that good. They've been a point spread machine. They are absolutely an ATM machine for their backers from a betting perspective. I hate this spot for them. I don't think I'll be on Detroit because of that, but 7-1 straight up, 7-1 against the spread is very difficult to go against. But this does feel like a spot where Detroit could be vulnerable. Their secondary still can give up plays. And if Nico plays especially, I think that Houston passing game is going to be in better shape. Now, again, big move by Detroit getting Zadarius Smith from the Cleveland Browns. A big trade for them to bolster the pass rush, which suffered a bit more from the injury suffered by Aiden Hutchinson. So that was a nice move for them. Not a great – I don't love this spot for Detroit, and that's putting it mildly, coming off a big division win and having to go on the road outside of conference now again for a second straight week on the road, this time outside of conference. Houston off a loss. They might get Nico back. They're at home. They're now a field goal, 3.5 underdog, and Houston's been good as a dog under DeMeco Ryans as head coach and C.J. Stroud at quarterback. So I actually think it's a Houston spot. If you like Houston, I wouldn't, I don't blame you. But I just cannot bring myself, with all the money I've made, Phil, on Detroit, I can't bring myself, including last week when I was on the Lions, I can't bring myself to bet against them. What do you think here, Phil? Great matchup here Sunday night.
Great matchup. I completely agree with you. This does feel like a spot where the Texans can come out and play well. Other than Nico Collins, though, the other thing that we do have to monitor, which is a matchup I'm really excited about, is this Detroit Lions offense of line versus the Texans front seven. Will Anderson, left the game last week with an injury. We're not sure if he's coming back. Yep. So that's a big one. The pass rush for the Texans, their edge rushers versus the Lions offensive line. I think it's going to be a great matchup to watch. I think, Nico Collins playing and Will Anderson have a lot to do with what I think here, because I think those are two, X factors that, tremendously help the Texans here. And, being a home dog, like you said, I think that this could be a spot for them, but it's just so tough to go against what the Lions have been doing all year long. I don't love this game. I cannot wait to watch it. But I think this is a gut check here. If you feel comfortable being consistent and trusting in your Lions, great. I also think this could be a spot where the Texans do surprise a lot of people as well. But if Nico Collins plays, I'm also taking an over here. But I think that's kind of where I'm at with this one. But I would probably trust in the Lions at this point, -3.5.
Phil, I can't do it. I can't
I
bet
know.
against Detroit.
Trust me too.
I can't. And they've been too good to me. I mean, every time I've backed them this year, I think I've won.
Yeah.
How can I do that? I get it. This is not a great Lions spot at all. But another thing that worries me, too, from a matchup stand, it's a Texan spot, but they've been struggling the last few weeks against the run. Jonathan Taylor ran the ball well against Breece Hall, ran the ball well. And Breece Hall hasn't always had a great game this year for the Jets. Breece Hall ran the ball very effectively against Houston last week. Well, now you got to deal with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, that double threat, out of the backfield for Detroit. And suddenly their run defense has sprung some leaks. They've had trouble covering slot receivers, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's as good as it gets from that standpoint. So there's definitely some matchup concerns here for Houston as well. So while the spot's great, this is a hell of a Detroit team. And we would need Detroit to be comatose, flat, lethargic, mistake-laden, penalties, turnovers. To me, that's what it would take for Houston here to win this game. We would need that out of Detroit here. And plus Jared Goff back indoors again, because this is an indoor stadium here where Houston plays. So, and this Lions team on the fast surface indoors, that's where this offense is absolutely lethal. So, but a great matchup. I do think it is a Houston spot, though. We'll see if they can take advantage of it. All right, Miami Dolphins, LA Rams. Monday Night Football, final game here of the card. We've got the Rams 1-point home favorites, 50 being the total here in this game. Tua, that's two very good games in a row from Tua Tagovailoa. And you could see after that game-winning field goal was made by Buffalo just how he looked devastated. And I'd be devastated, too, if I was him, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you were in his shoes and you were the quarterback and, of course, you played the position, you'd be pretty upset, too. I played a hell of a game against Arizona, and I got a big fat L to show for it. I played a hell of a game against Buffalo last week, and I got a big fat L to show for it. 0-2 when he played very well both games since he's been back from his injury against Arizona and Buffalo. I mean, they got 27 points in both games. That should be enough. And in both games, he played extremely well. Very frustrating, I'm sure. Defense is now back to being a problem again for Miami. The last couple of weeks, they have not stopped the run. They have been shredded a bit in the secondary. Kyler shredded them. Josh Allen did last week. A bunch of different receivers caught passes. Not what you want to see going up against Matthew Stafford in a Rams offense that, struggled last week against Seattle. But I think back home, they're better than that. Let's not forget there's a Rams offense that in this building, they put up 30 against a solid Minnesota team in a week before that. This is one where I just don't trust the Miami defense enough. I think Tua in the offense, though, can move the football against the Rams defense, though. I think the Rams defense, I lean over here. But I think if I'm going to – and I lean Rams, but I feel like with the Minnesota game a couple weeks ago, I like the Rams team total more than I like the point spread. I think if I were to bet the Rams, I prefer the team total over 24 here in this game. Because I think they can get that here at home against this Dolphins defense. But I do think that with the way Tua Tagovailoa has played here in these last couple games, he might be able to have success down the field here against this Rams secondary. And that's something to keep an eye on here. The pass rush has been very good, though, for the Rams. They've got these two guys up from Florida State, Jared Verse and Fiske. And these two guys have been phenomenal they just destroyed poor Gino down the stretch of that game against Seattle last week. And we both liked the Rams in that game, so they got it done for us against the Seahawks last week. The key is going to be, can the Miami O-line protect? Because, if that pass rush is negated and Miami can protect, this is definitely going to be a game where I think there's going to be some plays that can be made down the field. Obviously, I think Miami's going to have trouble with Kupp and Nacua. There's no question about that. And let's be honest, too, another reason why the Rams offense struggled, a joke of an ejection that was given to Nacua in that game. He was tossed, and they didn't have him for the whole second half. Obviously, he'll be back here for this game. But the pass rush, the various injuries that the Dolphins have had, so they haven't been able to get that pass rush as much, and I think that could open the door for Stafford to have time to find Cooper Kupp, find Puka Nacua, and all those receivers, Tutu Atwell and company down the field. So I lean Rams here at home, but I like the Rams team total over even more. Full game over 50. I could see this being like a 27-24 type of game, and that catches your over here. Phil, what do you think? Monday Night Football.
Yep, I completely agree with you here. I think this Dolphins defense just isn't it, and the Rams offense is a completely different team with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So I fully anticipate this being a shootout. I love the Rams team total over as well. I like this whole over as well. I just think it's going to be a shootout between these two teams. The Dolphins the Dolphins offense is starting to get a pulse a little bit here. I'm sure. Two frustrating losses. They're going to come out. I just don't see it with the defense. I could see the Dolphins coming out and putting up some great numbers offensively. But I completely agree with you here. I think Rams team total over and over in this entire game as well.
Two of the Rams' 4 home games have gotten into the 50s, and it was the two better offenses they played, San Francisco and Minnesota.
Exactly.
And Miami's offense with Tua has been very good. And the 2 games since Tua has been back, Phil, for the Dolphins, 28-27, 30-27 against Buffalo and Arizona, 55-57 points in those 2 games.
I could see the Dolphins winning this game. I really could. I just think it's they're
That's why I like the team total over more than that, because I could see Miami moving the ball too.
Exactly. That's where my head's at too. So
good stuff. Great job, Phil. Awesome, always breaking down these games every single week right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Shout out to everyone tuning in. Hit the like button for everyone watching on YouTube. Appreciate it very much. It is time for best bets for Week 10 here in the NFL. Phil, what do you like here this week for your best bet?
Man, I'm telling you what, this 49ers team coming off this bye, gaining Christian McCaffrey, Buccaneers decimated with injuries. -6 just isn't enough for me. I think the 49ers can run away with this one. My best bet of the week is definitely going to be 49ers -6 versus or the 49ers -6 versus the Buccaneers.
49ers healthy off the bye week. Christian McCaffrey back. Tampa on a short week. Brutal loss to Kansas City. Game that they had in the grasp and let it slip away. That will be on my card, and a team total over on the 49ers will be on my card too. San Francisco -6 against Tampa Bay. Best bet for Philip Nelson. My best bet for this Week 10 card. I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos against the Kansas City Chiefs. I really do think this is a competitive game, and there's been times with weaker Denver teams that they have given Kansas City some trouble and given them a tough game. And I think we're going to see more of the same. They're now 0-2 against the spread. The last 2 games against Las Vegas and Tampa Bay, Kansas City, laying more than a touchdown. You got the Broncos off a blowout loss in Baltimore. I think they have a strong effort, and it's good enough to at least keep this a 1-score game. A division dog as well. We like it this time of year. And yes, by the way, Denver has covered 4 of the last 5 meetings against the Kansas City Chiefs, including 2 in a row here at Arrowhead. And one of those was a 3-point win for Kansas City. So Denver Broncos plus the 8 against Kansas City for my best bet here for Week 10. Great stuff. A shout out to Philip Nelson. A great job. Anything you want to say, Phil, before we shut her down?
No, another great week ahead of us. Thank you guys very much for joining the show. I appreciate it. I love being on with Ian. Great insight. It's going to be a fun week, a fun weekend full of some great matchups. So I'm really excited, and good luck to everybody.
Absolutely. For Philip Nelson, I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy NFL Week 10. Enjoy the games, and good luck. And we'll be back with you next week for the Week 11 NFL edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.